"Listen," said the wing-sleeved child, stepping forward from the black of the street. "Listen, for the pane is thin, but it is not a door." It held no lantern, only a match that was never struck, and the folded wing at its side drew a pale line in the snow. There was once a harbour town, where winter had forgotten the road away. The sea lay under a skin of iron. The masts in the harbour stood still as needles in a cloth. Snow had filled the gutters, the steps, the hinges of gates, and every morning the people swept it aside, and every evening it came back and lay down again. In that town lived a baker whose ovens were red before dawn. His house stood on the corner where the quay road bent toward the church. By day the smell of rye and brown crust went out into the street, and the poor children, if they passed slowly, carried a little of it with them in their sleeves. By night one square window shone, after all the other windows had grown dim. It was not a great window, 4 panes only, crossed by black wood. Yet in that winter it seemed as broad as a summer field, for behind it there were firelight, a table, and the colour of bread. Outside that window, on the last night before the year should have turned and did not, stood Rasmus Lille. He was a small child, though no one would have known at once how small, for the snow rose about his boots, and the dark gathered round his hood. His coat had once been blue. Now it was the colour of old smoke. One sleeve hung empty, pinned across his breast. From the other side, where an arm should have rested close and human, there showed a long pale fold, feathered and stiff with frost. It was not wing enough to bear him. It was too much wing to hide. When the wind touched it, the feathers trembled, and Rasmus pressed them still, as one presses a hand over a secret that everyone has already seen. No one in the town had made the shape for him, and no one in the town knew how to take it away. Such things happen in stories that are older than pity. A child goes through a wood, or sleeps under a roof not meant for him, or accepts bread from the wrong hand, and when the morning comes, there is a feather where fingers were. The door remains a door, the spell remains a spell, the road home keeps its own counsel. Rasmus had had a mother once, and she had called him by his whole name when the kettle sang. "Rasmus Lille," she had said, "come here and mend this cord. Rasmus Lille, warm your hands. Rasmus Lille, do not stand in the draught." After she was buried beyond the church wall, where the snow made all graves equal, he had still kept the sound of it. He kept it better than he kept his bread, for bread was eaten and gone, but a name could be folded small and carried inside the breast. Now he stood near enough to the baker's window that his breath made a white flower upon the pane. It opened and faded, opened and faded. Beyond it, yellow light lay across the table. A loaf cooled under a linen cloth. A blue cup stood beside it, with one chip in the rim. The chip showed dark when the lamp burned behind it. Rasmus saw that small darkness more plainly than the loaf, more plainly than the fire. It was like a notch made by a tooth in the edge of warmth. Snow fell without haste. It settled on his hood. It gathered upon the pale feathers at his side. It lay upon the window ledge, and on the iron scraper by the door, and on the step where many boots had gone in before him. The baker's door was shut. It was not barred, it was not angry. It had only been closed in the evening, as doors are closed when the household is complete. Rasmus put one hand into his pocket. There, wrapped in a twist of rag, lay his last match. Beside it lay a narrow splinter of cratewood, smoothed by his thumb. He had been carving it with a bent knife when there was light enough in the shed behind the cooper's yard. The thing was not finished, yet it had already chosen a shape. A bird, perhaps, or a boat, or a child kneeling with a wing folded close. In the dark, his fingers knew each little cut. The wing-sleeved child walked a little before the listener and did not look back. Its match remained unkindled. Its wing drew one white mark after another, and the snow filled them as soon as they were made. Rasmus did not knock. Not yet. He stood where the lamplight found the frost on the glass and turned it amber at the edges. If anyone within had looked out quickly, he might have seemed no more than a clot of night beneath the sill, a child-shaped shadow with one pale thing at its side. But he was Rasmus Lille, and his feet were set together, and his head was bowed not from shame, but because the pain was low and he wished to see. It was not bread that Rasmus wanted first. Bread would have been good. The loaves within had split along their backs and shown the soft white under the crust. The smell came through the cracks of the house, thin now, for the cold took most of it and laid it flat against the wall. Still it came. It touched him and passed on. His mouth knew what bread was. His hands remembered crusts given at back doors, hard ends from market stalls, a heel dropped by a boy who had eaten only the middle. Bread kept a body a little longer in the world. Nor was it fire that he wanted first. The fire was there. He could see its life on the ceiling when it rose and sank. He could see the red bars of the stove through the lower pane, and the copper kettle that turned one side bright and left the other black. Fire would have bitten his fingers until they hurt again. It would have loosened the snow from his cuffs. It would have made the pale wing at his side drip and steam. He had dreamed of fire on many nights, as other children dream of apples. Yet fire was not the first thing. His feet had gone past pain. This was known to him. First they stung, then burned, then seemed to belong to some other child walking near him in the dark. Now they stood quiet in the snow. His hand, the human one, had grown small inside his mitten. The wing did not grow warm or cold in the same way. It took frost upon itself like a branch. He could move it a little, but not enough to fold it out of sight. What he wanted was one sentence. Only one. He had carried it all that day through the harbour streets. He had carried it past the fish sheds, where the nets hung hard as boards, past the church, where the bell rope was stiff and silent, past the widow's pump, where no water came because the handle had frozen in its lifted place. The sentence had not grown shorter. It had not become easier. It lay in him as the match lay in his pocket, a small thing with a head of hidden fire. He wanted to say, "It is I, Rasmus Lille." That was all. Not, "Let me in," though the door was before him. Not, "Give me bread," though the loaf waited under its cloth. Not, "See what has happened to me," though the white feathers showed in the lamplight and could not be denied. Only this, "It is I, Rasmus Lille." But the words must not fall down at his own feet. They must not strike the pain and come back to him as breath. They must go whole into another person. They must arrive as a letter arrives when the rain has not found the ink. They must be received with the door of the heart open, even if the house door stayed shut. For there are sentences that are made to ask for food, and sentences that are made to ask for pardon, and sentences that are made to buy and sell in the market. Rasmus knew none of these very well. He knew the sentence that proves a child has not been changed entirely, though the world has changed its way of looking at him. In the summer before the long winter, when his mother was still alive, he had gone once to the baker's shop, with 2 coins in his fist. The baker's wife had leaned over the counter. Her sleeves were dusted white to the elbow. She had looked at his face before she looked at the money. "Rasmus Lille," she had said, "you are tall enough now to carry 2 buns without dropping one." Then she had put 3 in the paper and folded it tight. He had carried them home like treasure. His mother had laughed and broken the 3rd in 2. The baker's wife had been under the ground since Martinmas. Rasmus knew that also. The churchyard held more than the snow showed. Yet houses remember their dead for a time. A chair remains turned towards the hearth. A cup is set higher on the shelf because the hand that used it is gone. Flour settles in the seams of a table, and no washing takes all of it away. Rasmus had thought, without daring to make the thought large, that if he stood where she had once stood within, some part of her remembering might come to the window. So he kept the sentence clean. He did not spend it on the wind. He did not whisper it to the snow, though the snow listened to everything and answered nothing. His lips moved once. No sound came. The white flower on the pane opened again. So he stood, and the window held its light. The wing-sleeved child spoke softly then, as if to the snow rather than to the listener. "Some words are too small to break glass," it said, "and too heavy to remain in the mouth." Rasmus took his hand from his pocket. The rag came with it, and in the rag the half-made carving. He held it under the sill, where the lamplight could reach only the topmost edge. The wood was dark from his fingers. A shaving still clung to one side, curled and thin as a sleeping eyelash. He had meant to finish it before he brought it, but the day had closed early, as days did then, and the cold had made the knife stubborn. It was a poor gift, he knew that, yet it had kept company with the sentence. Each cut had said it without sound. "It is I, it is I, it is Rasmus Lille." He had carved no face upon the little thing, for he could not remember how his own face had looked before people began to look first at the wing. He had carved instead a narrow back, a bent head, and something folded close against one side. Whether,